Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today it's time for another tutorial, and today we'll talk about the Speedsurfing Stance. So in previous videos on this channel we've talked about the technique during the slingshot, and we've also talked about the trim for speed surfing. Today we're going to take a closer look at the Speedsurfing Stance, because the stance is the most important thing when it comes to translating the power your sail generates into the board and into forward momentum. And for getting the most efficiency out of your rig and board, the Speedsurfing Stance is vital. Okay, let's take a look at some of the best guys in the world and their speed stance. So here we have Antoine Albo, Vincent Falconer and Gunnar Asmussen, who have all three touched the 100 km/h mark. So their stances, they have some similarities, but also there's a lot of differences in between them. But let's focus on the similarities. So all three basically have a stretched front leg, which is super important because this leg will translate the power from the sail into forward momentum. So you need a very stretched front leg and a lot of body tension to translate the power into the board at maximum efficiency. The back leg, in contrast, is a little bit bent. By bending the back leg and stretching the front leg, you put your body into the direction of the forward momentum, so you push with the front leg more forward than you push sideways on the board, and by doing that you translate the sail power into forward momentum on the board. You'll also want to keep your arms stretched out. By doing this, you get as far away from your sail as possible and you get a better leverage onto your system. So you put out your weight further, and by doing that you can hold more power in the sail. So stretch out your arms, stretch out your front leg and bend your back leg a little bit. So what I believe really helps the Speedsurfing Stance is training your legs. In my opinion, it's much more important to have strong legs in windsurfing and especially in speed surfing compared to having strong arms. Because your front leg while speed surfing basically does all of the work, and if you have a lot of body tension and strong legs, you will be able to translate the power from the sail much easier onto your board. So it's really important to have strong legs while speed surfing. Now, a lot of people can hit the Speedsurfing Stance and it can look somewhat decent at times, but what really separates the top guys from the amateurs is that they keep their stance during the entire run. So no matter if there's chop on the run or if the wind strength is changing a lot, they keep their stance and translate the power at all times through the board into forward momentum. And this really is the hard part about it. Because when it's easy conditions and light wind, it's more easy to hit the perfect stance and keep it. But when it's blowing at 50 or 60 knots, to keep your stance is not so easy anymore. And learning to keep your stance throughout all these conditions takes years to learn. I always find it super fascinating to watch guys like Antoine Albo during the speed run, because you notice that their rig is really not changing the position and there's very little movement in it. And that's because they have such a good stance and they're able to keep it throughout the entire run, even when the gust hits. And by doing that, they translate all the power into forward momentum. Because usually when you hit the right stance, you keep the pressure on your harness lines. And what that does is it keeps the board down, because it puts pressure on the mast, which kind of puts the board down. You want the board to ride as freely as possible. But if you don't put power onto your harness lines, what happens is that the power of the mast onto the board disappears and the board starts flying out of control, which we call tail walking, and doing that you either crash or you lose a lot of speed. And that is the reason why you want to keep the stance throughout all the conditions. And what is nice is that you can practice the Speedsurfing Stance basically in all conditions. Like, look at this picture here of me riding the 85 wide board with a 7.7 in like 15 knots. The stance is the same, so you can practice it in lighter conditions when it's more easy to find the perfect stance, and then translate it onto higher wind strength when you're actually on the speedboard. And that way you have some experience and know what to do, instead of when you just go out on slalom gear when it's really, really windy. because then you will have fewer sessions and you don't have as much practice and your stance will not look so good. Of course, over time everyone will develop their own style on the speed surfing stance. Here are the three top guys, Gunnar Asmussen, Antoine Albo and Vincent Falconer, and their stances look very different actually. And that is also because they have set up their gear a little bit differently. Like some people use shorter harness lines and lower the boom, or they have a lot higher boom, or the mast track position is different. And of course all these factors will have an impact on how your speed surfing stance will actually look in the end. So it's always a combination of your technique along with how you set up your gear. And also what I want to touch on is you can copy someone else's trim and setup of the gear, but it might not work for you because you developed a different style from them. So what might work for one guy might not work for the next guy, especially when you compare someone who's 2 meters tall and maybe 110 kilograms to someone who's 1 meter 70 tall and maybe only 60 kilograms. They will need to set up their gear a lot different to be able to hit the stance perfectly. Like for example, I myself, I like to use very short harness lines now. And I'm not the tallest guy, I'm around 180 centimeters tall. So I like to use 26-inch harness lines because for me, I get the feeling I get a lot more lift from the board if I use shorter harness lines. But also you will have a little less time for reaction if you have shorter harness lines. So this might vary. If you're a lot taller guy, you might like 30 or 32-inch lines for speed surfing. So if you have a lot of control over your gear, for example, you might be able to put a lot more power onto your harness lines and keeping the board down by doing that the entire time. And because of doing that, you can actually move your mast foot a little bit further back compared to someone who's maybe a beginner and still losing a lot of control. So he will need to put the mast foot a little bit further to the front so that the gear will not start tail walking. But yeah guys, that's it for this tutorial video. Get out there, practice the speed surfing stance, and let me know in the comments down below if you like this kind of videos and if I should make more of these kind of speed surfing tutorial videos. Until then, I'll see you in the next one and have a good time on the water.